Hi, I'm Diana Giselle Yanez, host of Highly Sensitive Money. I'm a money coach, certified financial planner, and a highly sensitive person who brings money and social justice together. If you're someone who feels deeply, can endlessly think through how one decision affects everything else, or has ever struggled with all the things that traditional financial thinking leaves out, you're in the right place. In this show, I chat with highly sensitive people on how they handle their money, and with money experts on how they cultivate social justice in their work. Questions? Please go to allthecolors.net and schedule a free 30-minute call. And I'm happy to share resources on investment management, money coaching, workshops, or anything else money and social justice related. Join us in this episode as we explore money and sensitivity while honoring that all of our well-being is interconnected. When Angela Barbash tells the story of clients telling her, if I'm going to lose half my money anyway, I'd rather lose it with the coffee shop down the street, something shifts in how we think about investing. Those questions, the ones that traditional finance has no answer for, are the ones that led Angela to co-found Revalue, a values-driven investment firm that helps everyday people put their money into their own communities. Angela shares how she turned growing up with financial instability into a fierce commitment that no one should be locked out of financial services because of how much money they have. Welcome, Angela, to Highly Sensitive Money. I'm super thrilled to have you here. I'm excited to hear all of your story. So thank you for taking the time to come on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really stoked to be here.
So we've met a couple of years ago through Rad Planners. I always like to describe Rad Planners as like financial advisors or financial professionals becoming radical and activists becoming financial professionals. And it's really become a haven to meet like-minded people and to create change in the industry. So again, just wanted to give that context of how we connected. But I'm really excited to just hear, how did you get to where you are in the world? And also where are you in the world right now? What is your work? What is Revalue? What is the firm that you've created? So if you could share your history, thank you.
Yeah. I'm delighted that I met you in Rad Planners. I've met so many great people in that space, which was really a COVID relief strategy for some of us that has now blossomed. So going all the way back to 2001, 2002, I was working for the Small Business Development Center within our local university, which is here in Michigan. I'm in Southeast Michigan. And I was at Eastern Michigan University, and I encountered this guy who ran an independent broker-dealer firm in our downtown in Ypsilanti. And he was like the guy that took out an ad in the local paper in 1999 to say the tech market's going to crash. And then in 2004 or 5, he was the guy that was telling anybody that would listen that the housing market was going to crash. And it wasn't because he was like some great predictor of the future. It was just that he was listening to people who were paying attention to the technical signs. And at that time, I loved math, but I thought I was going to go into public administration. I was an entrepreneur. My husband was in a heavy metal band, so I was running all the marketing and merch for that. And I did not think I was going to go into finance at all. But I met him, and he kept opening my eyes to this broader world beyond traditional finance. And he kept making the case that, one, if I didn't understand how money worked, I was going to have a really hard time affecting change in the world, in public administration or whatever career path I was going to take. And two, that there weren't enough women in this industry. Now, he had some self-serving purposes for that. He wanted me to come and work for him and recruit clients and leverage my womanness. And in the end, I decided to go my own path. I did apprentice with him and I did get licensed, but I then went on to work for Edward Jones for 5 years, ran a branch office for them, and worked in their home office in St. Louis for one of those years. And then eventually, it was really like post-housing crisis in those years from 2009 to 2011, where not only could I see that the system was just totally broken for everyday people, but my clients started asking me questions I didn't know how to answer. Namely, if I'm going to lose half of my money in something, I would rather lose it with the coffee shop down the street or the nonprofit around the corner that's trying to acquire a building. And at least I know that it went to pay like local salaries and it put food on their table. And I would feel better about that than just poof, overnight it's gone. And so they were like, how do I do that? And I was like, that's such a great question that I don't know the answer to. And so I asked everybody that I knew in the industry, former colleagues, current colleagues. I could not, like, everyone was just said, that's just not what you do. You just don't talk to people about those things. And that's for like very rich people. It's not for everyday people. And right around there, the Jobs Act passed in 2012. And so then I saw the legislative pieces started to fall into place. And I was like, okay, I'm not the only one that is wondering why 99.9% of our capital is in the global financial system and not in our own backyard, let alone the series of epiphanies that I had around the definitions of wealth and capital in the first place. Like, why do we only look at a balance sheet as a form of net worth that only accounts for dollar denominated assets? Why don't we account for our time or our health or our social relationships or our connection to the natural world? Like, why is none of that part of the financial advising conversation? It just started to become more and more obvious to me in those post '08 years that we had a very myopic view in the industry, and there was no holistic approach to it at all. And so I tried the firm that I was working for and several other firms. I tried to get them to broaden their horizons and let me talk about, at that time, local investing and holistic wealth. And they were like, we love you. You cannot talk about those things if you work for us, though. And after the fourth firm said that to my face, I was like, so I guess I'm starting a firm. That's what's happening right now. So I was one of those entrepreneurs that just came home one day after the last love you, but we're going to take your freedom of speech rights from you, exasperated sense of the world around me. I just came home one day and told my husband, we're starting a firm. I'm not looking for a job at another firm. We're going to start a firm, which I don't recommend to anyone to do it that way. It's always better to have a conversation with your spouse first, but that's not how we did it. So that was what started us. And that was January of 2012. And we launched in Revalue in August of 2013 as an RIA, registered investment advisory firm, which means that we're fee only fiduciary. We don't make commissions on products that we sell. Not a broker dealer. And it's just been a journey for the last 13 years of learning, not just learning how to run an RIA, how to hire people, how to serve clients, how to create sustainability for the organization, but also a journey in creating the marketplace that we needed to do the work we wanted to do. So we needed investors that understood what we were talking about. We needed investments that we could put capital into. We needed ecosystems that were supportive, that were collaborative. We needed to put all those pieces into place for us to have the firm that we knew needed to exist in the world. So it's been a wild, incredibly awesome ride for the last 13 years.
That's an incredible journey. So you've been in this industry for 23 years. The first roughly a decade, you were maybe in the more status quo, the more mainstream financial planning. And
Yep.
yet you had these like self-reflections of like, it's time, like there's so many missing pieces.
Yeah, for sure. It was, and I kept running into the reality of what I knew was possible in the world versus what the industry was prescribing for advisors and investors. And sometimes it was emotionally devastating to come face to face with that. I remember a moment in the fall of '08 where I was sitting in a regional meeting with other advisors for the firm that I worked for. And, you know, my day to day was people in my office absolutely losing it, breaking down in tears because they weren't going to be able to send their kid to college, or they're now underwater on their house, or they lost their job, or whatever happened. And I'm trying to problem solve those very real, very challenging economic issues, because I've always served like middle class, working class people. So those issues were front and center for me. And then I was at a regional meeting, and It was a very like raw, this was like October of '08. So Lehman Brothers had just failed. AIG had just gone under. It was huge. There was money market fund busts at American Express. It was a crazy time. And everyone, all the advisors around me on break were just like talking about their golf game. And did you catch the football game last weekend? And I'm like, how are you, what? Like, how are you not trying to talk to each other about how to manage the economic and emotional impacts of what's happening right now? How is that not the conversation every minute of the time that we're here? And I just broke down crying and had to leave the room. I was like, these are not my people. Clearly not my people.
Yeah, the really clear dissonance. I was interning. I was in college during 2007, 2008, and I was interning at Merrill Lynch. And I remember Merrill Lynch was bought out by Bank of America, so they were bailed out. And they also purchased Countrywide, right? So then we had these
Mm.
Countrywide brokers that spent all of their time playing fantasy football because it was in the fall. Right. That's what they were doing. And my mom was foreclosing on her home because she was a subprime mortgage. Like she had a subprime mortgage in California. And I was like 19. I didn't really understand. I was just like, this is so gross. I'm never going to work in this industry. Like
I
here I
know.
am, like 10 years later, I came
Right.
back,
Right.
but it's just
Which thank
so,
God you did, because those experiences as young professionals can really shape our view of the world, which is why I'm like, I'll just scream it from the rooftops anytime I get a chance that there are other ways to look at the finance industry and to be within the finance industry. It doesn't have to be that way. And fortunately, there's so many of us out there now that take a more holistic approach, are involved in community capital, values aligned investing, and it's now a chorus of people. It's not just one or two people that are like trying to shake everyone's shoulders to say there's another way to do it.
yeah. And it sounds like you both had the vision that there was another way of doing it, but you did end up finding at some point people who were aligned with what you were wanting to create. Can you talk a little bit about what that journey was like? Because I imagine like Revalue started in 2013, and
Mhm.
somewhere along the lines, there must have been someone yeah, here's like a tiny bit of what can be
Yeah.
possible.
Yeah, it was really interesting. So I had that idea in 2012 in January, and by April, I had gotten my thoughts collected enough to start doing public presentations in my community to anyone that would listen. I did like over a 4 month period, I had about 350 people like in those presentations saying, here's what the sharing economy is, here's what the B Corp movement is, here's what ESG and SRI investing is. Here's what community capital or local investing is. So I'm an anthropologist by education. And so the case I made was there is a trend happening. There is a confluence of social movements happening. And I'm asking all of you in the community, here's my talent and skill set. What do you want me to do with it? And who's with me? And so that process made it very clear that the community wanted an investment advisory firm that could provide financial planning and investment management that would cover all these things. And it sourced talent for me that helped me find co-founders. So the initial co-founders I had were my husband, Marshall, who's in tech and a web developer, and Pavan Mazumdar, who's a chartered financial analyst who was at the same time thinking about how do we help small businesses, like how do we get capital to small businesses and then help them exit to employee ownership, and like how do we do that. And then Eric Davis became another early co-founder. He just interned with us as a brand new graduate who was like, the world was just open to him and he was open to what we were talking about. And so they were my original co-founders, and they're all still with us today, which is pretty cool. And then as time went on, we got to the point where we had more clients and capital than I could really handle by myself as the primary advisor, because Eric and Pavan were really investment analysts. And I was doing all the delivery, client relationship, and business development. And I encountered Michelle Hooksum. And it's funny because I encountered her at a presentation that Deb Fries gave, and Deb was at Ujima Project, Boston Impact Initiative at the time. She's since retired out of that position, but she was in Grand Rapids in Michigan, and she was given this presentation, and I drove across the state to be there. And Michelle and I just beelined for each other across the room. We were like, we got to talk to each other. You've said insightful things since I've been here. And I got lunch with her and I was like, let's like come and join me at Revalue. And she had been burnt by finance. She was at Comerica and US Trust, and she'd been totally burnt by the industry, as most of us have some trauma story, right, in the industry. And she was like, I'm not coming back. I'm in nonprofit consulting now. There's no philanthropy. There's no way I'm coming back to finance. I'm like, no, there's a different way to do it. It took me 2 years to convince her that there really was a different way to do it and that she could take the leap of faith. And so she came over in 2019 along with Jane Bunch, who was a brand new graduate out of grad school, who was referred to us by someone in our network. And Michelle and Jane are still with us. And then Rebecca Blumenschein joined us out of Rad Planners. And then we hired a couple of other operations people this year. So now in total, we have 10 people all together. There's one other person, Clara, who helped us with operations and is an owner. And of the 10 of us, 7 of us own the company. And so employee owned and just grown it together as a little family, basically.
And that's so different, right? Because you're really like walking the talk of employee ownership, of shared economy, of a different model. One of the things that I love about Rad Planners is how we are reinforcing a different vision of what is possible within finance, because it can feel so isolating to say, I know that this is possible, or I believe that there is a way that I can work for working class families, middle class families, provide value, and also provide a positive income to a positive impact to my local community. And yet the mainstream is not like that. So I wonder, like in those early years before Michelle joined, those years when you were the only rep, the only person really servicing clients, how were you navigating that?
Mm. It was difficult. It was the first 5 years. They say in entrepreneurship that the first like 2 or 3 years typically will make or break you. And there's like the valley of death or the trough of discernment or whatever they call it. Those first 5 years were incredibly difficult before Michelle ended up joining, and I had now a co-leader. And so today, to fast forward for a moment, Michelle's now CEO and I'm COO and Chief Compliance Officer, and we co-lead. And but at the time when I was really trying to like develop the ecosystem and find clients and service the clients and manage the investment analysis and make sure that was all on track that Eric and Pavan were doing, it was really difficult to balance it all and not feel like this is never going to work. There were moments where I was like, this is just feels like an impossible task. Try to roll this boulder up a hill of building a new firm and servicing and building an ecosystem of community investments. So there's even investable opportunities. And how do you communicate those to people who have never invested outside of Wall Street before? They're interested, but they don't have any base in education about how to do that. And I think what got me through those early years was my support system, really my husband and my family and the network of people who were activists in the community, who were in different spaces and nonprofits or workforce education or workforce development. They were in public service in some way, but they were all loosely similar to how Rad Planners is now for the finance industry. At that time, it was this sort of loose knit network of people who were like, I see where you're going and I'm going there too. And we're all attacking it from different angles and we're going to get there eventually. We just all have to keep the faith. And if it weren't for those people, I don't know that I would have survived it. I really don't know that I would have survived it. Either I don't know that I wouldn't have given in and given up, or that my body and my mental health could have survived it. So I really shout out to Chris Miller at NC3, to David Palmer, who was at Workforce Intelligence Network at the time, to the folks over at Michigan State University who were moving in this direction. There were just such great people in Michigan. And I was very fortunate to be in a state that had a hotbed of activity happening already and like thought leadership. Whereas I could imagine that if I was in Topeka, Kansas or Florida, I don't know that I could have survived it because I don't know that those ecosystems existed at that time and place. So right
That's
timing, right place.
That's such a beautiful answer, right? Your honesty and being like, it was hard rolling a boulder uphill, and also acknowledging like the luck of location,
Hmm.
but also that was
Hmm.
influencing you as you were creating this. And then for anyone who's listening that's not in the finance industry, right? Let's think to those working class families, those middle class families who are thinking of like, how do I invest not within Wall Street, but in community investments? I'd love to hear your take on like, how do you introduce that to people? I imagine that at this point, people come to you already knowing about that and being attracted to it. But like for someone who's new to this, how would you introduce it?
Yeah, 93% of people that come to us, and we now have about 260 clients. We manage $128 million. So 93% of people that come to us, community investing is the top one or two thing that they want to do with us. 90% of those people have never invested outside of Wall Street before. So what we do is start them off with some passive education. Okay, this is a priority for you. We'll do all the financial planning analysis for you to help you understand like what percentage of your portfolio might be appropriate for these asset classes as an entry level. And while we're doing that work, here's your homework, here's your education homework, and you take it at the pace that works for you. And then at least once a year, we have a live cohort, educational cohort that carries people through the process with other people. That's here's all the terminology, a lot of stuff you've already hopefully read on your own, but here's how it works. Here's how to understand the due diligence part of it. Here's the difference between investing in funds and doing direct investing, which is like an individual business. And now let's have an issuer visit. So a visit from a fund that is out there in the world. Let's have them come and you get your feet wet with doing due diligence on that one particular fund as an example. And then after that, for the people that are like, okay, I've learned some basics. I know what we're talking about in terms of terminology now. I understand how this generally fits in my financial picture, and I feel comfortable with the risk involved. Now we're going to sit down with them and make a portfolio implementation plan. Just like we would on the public investment side, we do it on the private investment side. And that's where Rebecca was instrumental. She came in and is now the director of community investing for us so that she sits down with the client and over a couple of meetings, she hashes out with them exactly what investments that we've done due diligence on already are going to be the right fits for what accounts, what amounts, where are they held, how does it all work, who handles the paperwork, all the things, which is that was the piece that we struggled on until we hired Rebecca with that. It was just, it's so technically complex, right? You go on to E-Trade and you're like, I want to buy Google. Let's hope not Google. I want to buy Vital Farms. This is not an investment recommendation, but one of the companies I love, that's a B Corp company, egg producer. So I want to buy Vital, and you can just do it. I want to go see what analysts think about Vital. Just go read it. You just Google it and you'll get the answer. But I want to invest in Catchua. Again, not an investment recommendation. I want to invest in Catchua. You can't go to E-Trade for that. You can't go find analyst reports for that. If you're lucky enough to know somebody that's in Rad Planners, where there's been shared due diligence work, where we've collaborated together, then you've got some access point. So it's still so just like relational at this stage. It's not systematic and it's human involved and human centered, which is probably a good thing, right? We've seen what has happened with finance becoming the financialization of everything and everything being so quick that anybody can just jump online and buy and sell whatever. It's been disastrous in a lot of ways. So I'm not necessarily mad at it being human centered, but it makes it more difficult for sure.
Yeah, it's a lot more relational, right? It's not you can go on Robinhood and do what very it looks very close to gambling sometimes what I see people do on those really quick apps.
Yeah. Yeah.
And for a lot of the community investments that I know of, like you have to be an accredited investor, you have to have like how have you managed that? Are you focusing on having opportunities that are for non-accredited investors? And again, just for anyone listening who's not familiar with those terms, an accredited investor is someone who has over $1 million of investable assets. Or what is the income limit? Is it 250,000 for
It's
a single?
250,000 for single or 350,000 for joint.
And it's over the previous 2 years, right? So you
Mhm.
have to show proof of that income.
Yeah. So there's two ways we've been approaching that. So the first thing to know is that 40% of our clients are non-accredited. So we have no account minimums. So we're open. We've got a lot of smaller, like new investors. And so we have a scoring rubric for opportunities when they come to us that that helps us prioritize that list, because the list is a mile long of what you could invest in because there's just so much opportunity out there. So we had to develop a scoring rubric, and we score opportunities that are open to non-accredited investors higher than in that particular line item than those that funds that are only open to accredited investors. So that way they get priority in our due diligence process. And so that's one way that we've done it to bring those opportunities. The second way that we've approached that is that we've taught people more and more every year about direct investing. And so I'll point to King's Crowd as an example of a platform where you can go look at direct investments and jump off to Honeycomb Credit or Republic or WeFunder to go see that deal. So King's Crowd is really a great like one-stop shop. If they're not a platform themselves, they're just a one-stop shop like data aggregator. But then Honeycomb Credit is one of those platforms, and you can search by state, by sector, by women-owned business, minority-owned business, whatever your filter criteria is, and you can see what's available. And those are a lot more accessible because the minimums are like $100 or $50 or $250, but higher risk because it's a single entity versus a fund. Those are the two ways that we try to connect non-accredited investors with opportunities, prioritize non-accredited accessible opportunities, help them understand direct investing. And then the third way, which doesn't get a lot of fanfare, but is potentially the biggest impact thing that we could do, is policy and advocacy work. So right now, the accredited investor definition is being scrutinized. The INVEST Act was passed in the House in December and is now going to the Senate. And that would allow people to take a test, a competency or kind of awareness test to become accredited. So they could prove it, and additional designations that say, well, if you have this or this, you're just automatically accredited. And the Congress made a move like that about a year and a half ago, where they said, if you're an investment advisor, you're accredited, which I always thought was funny because I'm not accredited by wealth and haven't been my whole life. And I thought, I'm an investment advisor. How could I not be accredited? Are you trying to tell me I don't know what I'm doing? That's just silly. So they finally fixed that. And now they're trying to take it a step further. Me personally, I think we should just scrap accreditation rules altogether. I think it needs to go away. It was put in place 90 years ago in a very different marketplace. And any chance I get in front of policymakers or regulators to make that case, I do, because I just really think it needs to be on the table as an option.
Yeah, that's exciting. Thanks for going over those 3 different ways that you support unaccredited investors.
Yeah.
One of the questions that I love asking people, because this podcast is for highly sensitive people, so we often just adore having context. I would love to know the financial background of your childhood and how that may or may not affect the work that you do today.
Oh, yeah. It definitely impacts the work that I do today. So I grew up with, my parents never got married. They had a 4-month love affair in the military that produced me in Naples, Italy. And then they split up. She was in the Navy and he was in the Marines, and they went their separate ways. And so my mom raised me as an only child and a single mother. And then when I was 13, I went to go live with my dad, who had gotten married and had 3 other kids in the house. And so it was very different households, but what they both had in common was that my parents were serial bankruptcy filers. So I had seen how they had tried to maintain some semblance of middle class lifestyle without really having the economic access to do that. And their out for that was just hit reset. And corporations do that all the time without shame. They consider it a corporate organizing action, but households do it with great shame. And so I saw both of these households really struggle. The adults in these households struggle with the shame involved in this, and the habits and tendencies that led up to it, and just repeating those cycles over and over again. So there were times where we were getting food from food pantries at the church. There were times where we didn't have a car at all. Like utilities were touch and go, lots of things like that. And so then I was on my own basically at 17. And so I got into early adulthood and I made a lot of the same mistakes because I hadn't really been taught how to manage my money well, how to manage a bank account well, how to avoid overdraft fees. And I remember when I turned 18 years old, I swear it must have been within a week, I got a credit card offer pre-approval from Bank of America with a $10,000 credit line at 18. And I'm on my own. So I'm like, I could definitely use $10,000 right now. Thank you very much, Bank of America, at probably 27% interest. And I was so ignorant about money management that I went and purchased a car, a $3,500 Thunderbird on the credit card. I didn't even try to go for financing. I just put it on the credit card. It took me a decade to wipe that out, to wipe out that debt. And it was like a very slow, painful journey of learning basic finance, let alone wealth building, all of that. And I learned alongside my clients, or sometimes because of my clients. Like they'd come in and they were 10 years ahead of me and they'd done XYZ. And I was like, that sounds really great. I should be doing that for myself. Which, of course, kicks up all kinds of imposter syndrome in your 20s when you can't, have the like confidence and set in yourself and you're comfortable in your skin to know that's okay. It was very difficult to be in this industry in my 20s, but all of that really impacted me. And so I knew that if I was going to start a firm one day, there are some hills that I will die on, and staying accessible to people, regardless of their wealth or income, regardless if all they can pay us is $5, that is a hill I will die on. I will not be a part of a firm that shuts people out. I understand we have to put maybe some parameters or guardrails on that. Like we can't take everyone and then become unsustainable and then fold as a firm because of that. We have really to be in service of people who are trying to build income or wealth and have economic mobility. We have to have longevity ourselves. And we understand that, and we've put some guardrails on that, but it really has not meant that we've had to say no to people. We might delay them a little bit or kind of service them in a different way, but always with high quality. And no matter what the question is that comes in, we're there for them. They got $1,000 Roth IRA and they're like, this is all the money I have. We're there for you. You get full service. We don't care if it's $1,000. It doesn't matter to us. What matters is that we are helping people get out of the cycle of poverty. And coming from a place of intergenerational poverty, my father's side is Mexican. And so it's very intergenerational poverty driven. I understand the gravitational pull of poverty and what that does to the first generation that breaks out of it, and how hard it is to get traction, because you really have to care for, you don't have to, but a lot of us want to care for all of our extended family. I'm sure we could have a whole conversation about that another time. but yeah, so all of this has shaped sort of who I am and my role in the firm. So the whole team knows that if we get a new client that comes in and they're self-employed, 40% of our clients are self-employed, they're first gen wealth builders, they're struggling to understand credit scores and all these things, that they go to me. They right out of the gate, I at least start with them, and then they might end up working with someone else after I do the initial work with them. But I'm really passionate about serving those people.
Wow, that's beautiful. That's beautiful, of really using what you grew up with and transforming it.
Yeah. Yeah. And trying to continue to have grace for the generation before us who are mostly still with us. My mom has passed away, and she was an addict on top of being a single mom. So it was like that complication finds itself in our families as well. And with low income people that are struggling economically often are struggling with addiction issues and mental health issues. And so aside from her, all the rest of our parents are here. And so I think it's important that the conversations I have with my clients about the grace we need to have with that generation, and not to just be like, you didn't know what you were doing, like how ignorant or whatever, blaming them. Yeah, there's personal responsibility, but there's also just, the system is confusing. It's hard. It's weird. It's set up against us in a lot of ways. And I think it's really easy for people who have not experienced that or lived that to just put all the blame on those people. And so I try to, no matter how well we might build our lives and break that cycle, that intergenerational cycle for our children, I really am trying to instill in them grace for people who are still in that place or who are in our family and have experienced that.
Yeah, I want to make a parallel with something like diabetes because if you live in a place that has a food desert, it's going to be harder to get fresh food. And
Mhm.
also, research shows that like continued exposure to racism just makes you more prone to diabetes. There's a
Yeah.
reason that more Blacks and Latinos have diabetes. There's just more racism that you're encountering day in, day out. So when it comes to finances, it's again that legacy of all of these unseen things. And at the same time, there's a paradox of personal responsibility because someone could say, yes, I live in a food desert and still I will go out and make sure that I find a farmer's market that takes EBT or whatever it is. But it's a complex thing. So I love that you're naming this and that you're bringing it and that you continue to make it such a big part of your focus.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's a lasting legacy for all of us that have been there and then now
Mhm.
generation to try to break out of it.
So I want to take a quick turn back to what we were talking about earlier, because when we were prepping for this conversation, one of the questions that you were really excited about is what are your favorite community investments? What are the community investments that right now you're thrilled about? And maybe also like some stories of like in your 13 years with Revalue, what are some of the community investments that you've been most excited about being a part of?
Yeah. I will tell the story of two and always have to caveat not investment recommendations. These are just case studies. So the first is from a while ago. There was a developer in the Ann Arbor region. Ann Arbor is a town that's next to our founding town, Ypsilanti, and in a very wealthy town. And Ann Arbor has had a culture of environmental stewardship for a very long time and a very real need for affordable, attainable workforce housing and very few places where there was mixed income neighborhoods. And so there was a developer that I had encountered back in 2018, maybe, and he was really excited about building a brand new neighborhood that was mixed income, that had a centers, community shared resources at the center of the neighborhood, that had a childcare facility, a farmer's market like set up, kind of the community assets. And he wanted it to be like the first neighborhood that was LEED certified and all the kind of fancy bells and whistles of environmental stewardship around building, like a living building challenge and all the things. And so I heard about him having this vision and I came to him and I said, have you ever considered raising capital from the community for this? Not that you necessarily need the capital from the community because these are multi tens of $1 million projects. And maybe the community at that time, especially in 2018, 2019, maybe they could come together with $1 million of that capital stack. So relatively like inconsequential to the total capital stack. But I said, look, the community needs opportunities or needs examples that they can point to that says that was community funded and here was the outcomes of that so that then it can inspire action across the country, across the region. Like we need good case studies. And fortunately, he bit on that idea and he said, okay, I'm going to do it. And so he raised capital. That project's called Viridian. And they raised some community capital for it, maybe $1.5 million for it. And they broke ground a couple of years ago and have been building out the phases of it. So it's still under development now, but it's all moving forward. And so that is really cool. Every time I see the updates and disclosure, I did invest in that project because of course, like we need the experience as investment advisors also as investors. Every time I get an update for that, I'm like, oh, that's so cool. They're doing the thing. That's great. The second case study I'll point to is actually a company that I just encountered that is a recipient of funding through one of the funds that is in our data room and some of our clients have invested in. And the fund manager is Fair Food Network, which is primarily in Michigan. The fund is the Fair Food Fund, and the company is Mushroom Angel. And again, not investment recommendations, but we happen to be pulling together our staff and some clients for an in-person event in Detroit at the end of this month. And we really wanted to connect our clients and staff with the companies that we're invested in directly. And even if it is through a fund. And so we're actually going to do a site visit with Mushroom Angel. And what they do is it's a couple that started this food manufacturing company where they create burger patties out of mushrooms. And they've gotten it in stores all over the country. And they're started out of Eastern Market in downtown Detroit, which is like a storied place for food startups. And so I just had the call with them a couple days ago to prep for this experience where they're going to have us taste some new recipes and take a look at new packaging. And it's just so exciting to see, families and individuals, groups of people come together, have an idea, take a leap of faith, go find the connections to make it happen, get the capital that they need from the investors who are really going to care about what they're doing, and then go do the thing. And we know that not every company is going to succeed. There's a lot of challenges to growing any kind of company. But like I said at the beginning, at the end of the day, our money put food on the table of people, whether it's the founders or the employees or the suppliers that they chose. And locally owned and community rooted organizations tend to circulate that capital in their community more than national or multinational corporations do. So we know that those dollars are just continuing to work in the community time and time again. They tend to, I think the stat is that they circulate 7 times in the community. And so I'm super excited to get to see them in person, get to taste their product, because I didn't know that there was a burger patty made of mushrooms. And I'm not vegetarian, but that sounds exciting to me.
I love it. And I love how we've come back full circle, right? Because you said like part of what led you into this journey of starting to question investments and creating Revalue was people saying, if I'm going to lose money, I want to know that it went to something that I can be proud of in the meantime. And just like to highlight again on that point of how money that's invested locally circulates 7 times, those national organizations, the multinational corporations, like a lot of the profit is siphoned off to the top. Mm-hmm. Whereas in companies that are much more locally focused, it's more of not fully a shared economy, but there's more likelihood that people along the way are all gaining from it. So, well, we're coming up at the end of our time together. I so appreciate you sharing your story, the work that you're doing. You've really helped create the space for this marketplace to even let people know what this means and creating that space for collaborative capital. Think you're a pioneer in this area. And I'm excited to see how Revalue continues to change in the next 13 years.
Oh, awesome. Thank you so much for having me. And I really want to lift up everyone around me that's really doing all of this work, our whole team, all of the people on Rad Planners, our peers and colleagues within the industry and beyond the industry that are making this world possible for me to even show up and be excited every day about the work we're doing. And of course, all of our clients too.
There's something about Angela's story that stays with me. This idea that the struggles we inherit can become the compass for the work we do. She didn't just break out of intergenerational poverty and move on. She built something that opens the door for others to break out too. And she did it by refusing to accept the industry's answer of, we love you, but you can't talk about those things here. Angela holds both the systemic analysis and the deeply personal. She knows the financial system is broken, and she also knows what it feels like to only have the tools you were taught by your family, whether they work or not. Her ability to see the big picture and show up for the person just starting out on their financial empowerment journey is heartening. And I especially love seeing Angela glow when she talked about community investing and the things that are possible in finance. Thank you for joining me on Highly Sensitive Money. I'm Diana Giselle Yanez, and I hope this episode helped you see how money and sensitivity can work together while honoring our interconnected well-being. We have the power to create a system where everyone's needs are met because nature is abundant. If you found value in today's conversation, please take a moment to leave a review and share this episode with someone who could benefit. Your support helps this message reach more people navigating their own financial journeys. A thank you goes to Mike Schul for the music and Juan Antonio Nunez for producing. For more resources on bringing money and social justice together, sign up for my monthly newsletter over at allthecolors.net. I also invite you to schedule a free 30-minute call where we can talk about money coaching, investment management, and all things money and social justice. Until next time, remember that your sensitivity and deep thinking is your superpower.